Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. Let's law better. Together we explore topics of interest to legal operations. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They're an act of courage. Want to get the most from this conversation? Ask questions, comment, like, follow, say hello. In short, engage. And don't forget to have a blast. Shaking up the legal world takes a lot of elbow grease. So let's make sure we've got each other's backs along the way. Let's begin. Here's your host, Olga Mack.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self. This is the episode where we are focusing on legal operations. And we're doing it in the context of this book. You might have heard we have written a book, almost 50 of us leaders in the future of law. I'm really excited and psyched, frankly, that we've been able to bring this amazing group of leaders to a collective place called this book. And I am determined to bring every single one of them to you so you can ask questions and learn from them, not just by reading the book, which absolutely you should do that, but also by engaging with them, because each and every single one of them is amazing leader and really gives me a lot of promise about future of law. My guest today is a repeat guest. So to say that I love him is a total understatement. I'm really excited about this conversation. Chad, welcome to Notes to
Ah,
My Legal Self. Good to have you back, friend. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me back again, Olga. So my name's Chad Aboud, and I'm based in Toronto, Canada. And I was formerly a general counsel when I was on Olga's show a couple of years ago. And during that time, I implemented LegalTech, which is what brings me here. And since then, I've launched my own consulting and coaching business for lawyers and for other professionals who are looking to uncover more of what makes them naturally great and to make their way forward easier. And so, there's a natural connection there to how I implemented LegalTech in my general counsel journey by uncovering, what I was great at and those around me.
I love it. So if you're excellent as general counsel, you get to show to in-house leader show. And if you really make it in life, you get to be a part of legal operators show. So excited to have you in this conversation. Before you became the general counsel and before you've written this book, what did you do before that? What was life before the general counsel?
Yeah. So my lawyer life journey started out in a national law firm. And so in Toronto, I was helping private companies go public companies buy and sell each other, raise money. And what I found after doing that for 5 years was incredible skill building, but I was drawn to two things: helping train other lawyers and finding more efficient ways to do the deals. And I didn't see those two things that I highly valued being core to the job that I was doing day to day. And so in 2015, left, traveled around the world with my life partner for 6 months, came back, and that was when my in-house journey began. So for about 3 years, I was in-house counsel at an amazing company called Indigo, which is like Canada's version of Barnes and Noble. Indigo would feel probably an upscale version of Barnes and Noble. And I did that for 3 years, learning from an incredible group of in-house lawyers about what it means to work with the business, to be really curious about them and care deeply about them. And that was, such an incredible journey for me that I wanted to take that into building my own team in my own way, in my own brand, with my own process, with the priorities that deeply were meaningful to me. And one of them was LegalTech. So in 2019, I became the general counsel of a portfolio of technology companies called Audience View that provides online ticket buying solutions to venues. And I did that for 3.5 years before I departed it again without knowing what I wanted to do next, but just knowing that the next phase wasn't what I was doing at that time. And I took 3 months to kind of think about it before I launched my coaching and consulting business in January 1 of 2023.
I love the journey, and I've been a witness to this amazing journey and really feel honored to call you my friend. So thank you for sharing that. Big law, a few general counsel gigs, enlightenment after traveling the world, and
That
sharing
happens.
your wisdom with everyone. Oh yeah, it happens all the time, which is why one of the reasons why I doubt I travel. I'm well known for that. So I think you and I are on the same page. And then this book happened. How did this
Yeah.
happen to you? And maybe even more importantly, why say yes to this?
Right. Right. Good questions. I think on the first one, and this is what I tell a lot of people when I write or when I'm coaching or doing presentations is if you give what you are naturally meant to give, not what you think you're supposed to do, not purely what you know about, right fit people find you. And so Humaira was one of those people. And, we worked together, we collaborated together on a previous project that she had. And we stayed together without a lot of effort simply because we were complementary minds. We were both trying to help the legal industry move forward in a way that was more fun and more productive. And so when she reached out to ask if I would contribute to this project, the project itself is meaningful, but also for me, I'm extremely relational, probably because I'm a Pisces. And Humaira was somebody who I felt a closeness to. And with the group of folks, like 50 folks that are involved in this that, like yourself, I admire and I think are incredible thought leaders. I felt like we were doing something important that was helpful to the version of me that would have liked to read this, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so it was meaningful to me on its own.
I love that. And Humaira and Meme, my two other co-editors of the book, I keep asking them to come to the show to be surprise guests. And they
Yes.
said there may be, and I'm waiting for the surprise, but it ain't happening today. But it will happen one day. I guess I'm really good at peer
Meme
pressure.
should just come through your sliding door and just like walk right through your sliding door.
He used to live in California. That could have been possible. And I do entertain guests through that sliding door. That is what it's for, so that I have a separate exit and entrance. I'm glad you noticed it. I have an I have an exit in mind every time. I love that. So you implemented technologies in the past, and you have sort of a point of view of how to do it well. What is your philosophy there?
I think the core message is it's not about the legal team, which is a bit of a hard one to think about for some folks.
That doesn't make you popular, does it, Chad?
It doesn't until you get the win and then you're pumped. So this is the thing that I think about the legal industry that's a bit interesting is we know the problems, we know the solutions. It's actually the bridge to get from one to the other. A lot of other industries, you're not sure what the problem is, you haven't quite crafted the solution. Legal industry is not really like that. We know it's extremely manual. We know lawyers are getting burned out by work that is administrative and ineffective because it's not consistent, it's not fast enough to keep up with the way the business teams are scaling. So we know the problems. We also know the solutions. There's tons of technology out there. There's more technology than any lawyer can probably even wrap their arms around these days, but it's the bridge to get there. And so the win, I think, is if you become deeply curious about the other teams in the business, in the larger business that are going to interact with this technology in some way, and you figure out what they really care about and what they hate, you can serve up legal technology to solve their problems and not even worry about it being a legal tech thing. It's just a piece of technology.
Serve up legal technology. I love that. How do you figure out people's pain points and frankly need for legal tech, but without telling them the legal tech?
Yeah, I think it's showing up without having to pre-know what you're going to say. A lot of folks are like deeply heavy into like prescriptive wording and exactly what they want to sell. For me, it's more relational. And so if I go in, the pre-knowing is only I want to be really curious to figure out what is really motivating for them and what's really painful. And the reason why I care about both, first of all, altruistically, I just think that's a nice way to be in the world. But from a business perspective is massively important wins and big pains. They get attention, they get resources, they get money. And so I focus on those two things through deep conversation of like listening and empathizing, because when you listen and empathize, people reveal stuff to you because they think, oh, he cares. And I do care. He wants to help. I do want to help. And so they tell you, we're really focused on this. I know the scoreboard says we're doing this, but we're really focused on this. And this is what we have budget for. This is what we have resources for. That's the data you need, because that's the talk track that you're going to use in the next phase in order to serve up your legal tech to solve their problems.
So let's talk. Let's make it specific. Come on. I mean, this is
Sure.
abstract is only exciting so far. You implemented a piece of technology. What was this, and kind of what was your action 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah. So when I showed up at this portfolio on day one, I realized that it was a portfolio that was already growing and was going to grow a lot more. And so the first thing that I did is I realized, okay, these are a collection of small to medium sized companies, and small to medium sized companies typically, especially, 2019, only have and had manual processes. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to hire an army of lawyers. And so went to the whiteboard on day one and I said, like, what are the things that I see that I'm going to be asked to do that matter to the business that I can automate fairly quickly? And I don't mean automate as in buying legal tech straight away. So the first thing I did was NDAs. And I simply took a Word document that there was like 8 different variations and I folded it into one and I made it locked with fillable fields. And then I put it into a centralized folder that the business teams had access to. Now, nobody could mess it up other than populating the client name and an address. And most of the time, it would work for the scenario that we were using it for, and it would go straight to e-signature. I don't worry about edge cases out of the gate. I worry about main use cases. That is the most 101 level of getting a win that speeds up things for the business, keeps the construct consistent, and totally removes the lawyer from the work. Business teams love it, and it was way better for me. So that's like 101 level about how I thought about injecting technology into the business before I did a CLM.
So how did you decide which pain points to solve? Like in that specific
Yeah.
scenario, what was the conversation like? What were the repeated themes? How did you identify the pain points?
Yeah. So I was very direct in my words and I asked folks what they liked about working with legal, what they didn't like, what they like about their own job, what they didn't
Hey
like.
man, what do you hate about me?
100%. I will go straight to the core. And especially if you're coming in somewhat fresh into a role or into an organization, this is your chance, right? And so what you'll hear, and it's such a consistent theme, don't know where to find things, don't understand it, feels too complicated, hate red lines. And so I said to myself, well, how do I eliminate as many of those things as possible from a time and consistency and confusion perspective? Streamline, simplify, put on their shared folder, not on the legal team shared folder, because they don't want to think about going to another drive. They use their drive. I wanted to operate from their perspective to whack out time and make it simpler. And that's what fillable fields do. Business teams use fillable fields, in Google Forms all the time. You got to make the experience feel like their experience. If you make it feel like a different thing, then they're going to throw their hands up and say it's a legal thing. That was the last thing I wanted. I wanted legal things to become business things.
I do want to talk about legal being business things. And I really love that approach and want to emphasize that. Before we get there, I do find that when I talk to my business partners around what can legal do better, what do you find annoying? How can I be a better partner for you? I people are pretty open to share. They,
Yeah,
I've seen a GC before me. They had an experience with my team. They now have had experience with me. I do it kind of across the company at every level of employee, and it's so enlightening every time. Have you done that exercise?
for sure. And I think you can also like witness it too. Like for some folks, that might be a very vulnerable and sensitive experience to have. And if it is, you can just pay a lot of attention, not only to the work that you're doing in documents, pay attention to the tone and energy that people have when they're coming to you and when they're leaving. Because you will notice when they're leaning in versus when they're getting frustrated. And if you can start finding trends between maybe it's time, maybe it's confusion, then you can start recognizing the pain points. And so for me, I like to ask those questions, but for some folks, maybe you've been in a seat for a while and you don't feel like you can ask it because it feels too sensitive. If that's the case, then start paying a lot of attention to when people seem excited to be with you and when they seem frustrated in a conversation, and start making your own little analog notes about like the legal piece was too long or the time frame took too long. And you can start making like little data points to yourself about what the business teams get frustrated with.
So, how did you get business people excited? I mean,
Yeah.
you can definitely gauge frustration. You
Yes.
rarely get folks super excited about law. I mean, there is a sort of ceiling on that excitement. There's a
Totally.
reason why they really want to outsource that to you, and you just say yes and rubber stamp, and off we go, preferably
Yeah.
quickly. right? So there is sort of a level of negativity and frustration that you may have to deal with, but the excitement part of it is going to be always measured, tapered. I
Yes.
don't know. But
It's a way better lever. Like money, speed, data. That's what business teams care about. And brand, if you're dealing in a brand org. But like money, speed, and data, you will win almost anywhere. And so I just turned all my attention to that. So when I moved through the simpler automations, like this NDA I was talking about, which is just a locked field of word, then I moved eventually to the CLM. And so how did I get this? I didn't actually want to purely talk about pain, and I didn't want to talk about the law for the reasons that you said, which is that doesn't get enough excitement. And you need excitement because you need money, resources, and attention. So think about revenue, speed, and data. So here's what I did. I went to the sales team after I'd been observing them for a while, helping them in kind of that manual world. And I got a deep appreciation for what they care about. Closing deals. Why? Commission, quota, their personal recognition within the company. So for them, it's speed of closing deals. So that means you got to make the deal structure decentralized, 24/7 access, and as quickly as possible, because that's how they make money. Okay. So that's a sales team, close deals faster. When I think about the account management team, what do they care about? Well, for them, especially if you have like a volume of clients, then you need good data that you can break down by filters and segments, because account management teams will always tell you at the last minute, they're getting asked, hey, can you rip a report down on this segment of our clients? This is not easy if you're operating in a bunch of Excels. And so I realized that the big win for the account management team, other than renewing contracts, but that was going to be handled through the win with sales, was being able to respond to data requests from the management team. So we needed consistent data. Okay. So that was going to be the win for them. And then I thought about the finance RevOps team. They're invoicing, which is very difficult when you have a volume of clients in terms of collecting the money, invoicing accurately. And so I realized that it was going to be collecting money, getting good data, and the speed of then collecting what was owed to us. And I went and spoke to each of those teams about those goals and problems. And I told them that I had a solution for them. That's what got them excited.
so you didn't sell it to them as a legal tech solution. You sold them to them as a business solution to their problems.
Yeah, because I just so happened to be in the middle of it. I knew from working with all those teams, and I knew that I had this kind of hub for all these spokes that I could solve for them. And so I just asked them. I didn't get into the weeds on LegalTech and which CLMs are out there. I just said, like, this is what I hear your problem is. And it sounds like your win would be getting more accurate data, having an integrated process so that the contracting actually connects to the invoicing. And they said, yep. I said, well, I can solve that for you. And it's not going to cost 7 figures to do it. And if we have enough resources, we could probably do this in like 6 months. What do you say to that? And they said, 1,000%. How do we do that? That's the win. Once you get that energy and support from 3 massive teams in any org, sales, account management, finance, that's where the money is. That's where the humans are. That's the win.
I guess all you have to realize that the world does not revolve around you.
Totally. And that's what they're saying in their mind. Every time they're talking to legal, business teams are saying, I don't know why you think you're the biggest slice of the pie in this organization. We almost didn't have a legal function 2 years ago, or, depending on the size of the org. And so a lot of them are saying, why are you talking about the law to me? That is your job. They don't care if the legal team is negotiating more or less contracts. They don't know how long it takes. They don't know the effort involved. They assume that's what you're getting paid for. And so if you talk to them about what gives the legal team more efficiency, they're going, so what? Who cares? But if you say to a sales team, hey, don't you want your sales reps around the world to be closing deals 24/7 so that you can make the money faster and close quota? And they're like, yeah, of course, that's our business. And you say to the account management team, hey, don't you want to be able to rip down client segments of data that's accurate and usable in a nice report? Yeah, of course. Hey, finance team, don't you actually want to collect on the money that's owed to us? Yeah, of course. Well, now you're talking to them in their language. And so they start talking to you instead of going into a conversation with a lawyer and saying, oh God, now I got to translate all this boring legal stuff. I have no idea why I'm here. Massive difference, even though you're still talking about the same product.
I love the humbling moment. It sounds like somebody ever told you 2 years ago we almost didn't have a legal function. Uh, I had experience of being general counsel of a nonprofit that haven't had a lawyer on the ground for about 100 years.
Right.
So imagine that conversation. Oh, we
Yeah. And they're
haven't had
just
a
like,
lawyer in the last 100
yeah.
years. Why do we need you?
So
Who
what? Why are
are
you changing everything? Yeah, we didn't have you last Tuesday, you weren't even here and we were just fine. So what do we care? Like legal is in many organizations, how they feel, an optional slice. And then when you get into the pie, you're not necessarily a big slice. So the way that you get to have more of your pie is by getting on the other teams, finding the wins for them. That's how you infuse yourself throughout the entire pie instead of worrying about, oh, how can I make the legal slice bigger? No, nobody cares about that.
Yeah, I mean, the enlightened general counsel do know one thing is that if you want to actually get stuff done, you need to make sure that people think it is their idea, not yours. So I call it walk around and say 1 + 1, 1 + 1. And then when somebody says, Olga, I know the answer, it's a 2. I don't know how it came to me, but it's totally 2. We
That's
should
right.
do it 2. Will you support me for 2? And you say, yeah, you're brilliant. Let's do it. So I think it's a
That's right.
version of a same thing of solving folks' problems, removing yourself from this and not making sure that it's not about legal, because it's really hard to sell laws. I mean, it really is
Yeah.
not a good that everyone wants to buy every day. Let's talk about sort of, you manage to sell it, you start implementing, but there is sort of the level of energy that needs to be maintained through the procurement process, through implementation process, through training process. Having implemented many things myself as a senior lawyer, as a general counsel, as a vendor, that's a lot of hard work. And
Yeah.
it's one thing to sell to someone, once. It's another thing to maintain that excitement and energy for, I don't know, 3 to 6 months or
For
more of
sure.
implementation, depending kind of what you're implementing and how big your organization is. So what do you do about that?
Yeah. So you're 1,000% right. And this is where, like, if you actually do understand and get this curiosity win and you speak to their perspective and you find the excitement in the budget, like that's the core for sure. But this is the work, the part that you just described, like the sourcing, the demoing, the scoring, the buying, implementing. This is the work. And so what I did here was I made sure that the key leads of these business teams or their designate, if they wanted, had as fair an opportunity and a voice to be as part of the process as legal was. I wanted them to experience the full demo cycle from their perspective. So when I was talking to the vendors, I didn't want to get into the details around clause libraries when I had sales teams on there. I wanted for them to feel what the flow would be from the CRM into the contract management tool, because that's where their team lives, in the CRM. So does this feel the same? Does it feel hard? Does it feel easy? What does the output look like? What does an e-sign look like? I just wanted the sales team to look at that. So it was a next step of focusing the business teams on the things they care about and not dragging them into things, if they don't want to, on things that they don't care about, and always giving them the chance and the opportunity to be a part of something because I cared about their perspective. The win was not trying to get the thing that legal thought was the best. The goal was getting the thing the organization needed the most.
I love that. And that just seems like a repeated theme. You
Yeah, for
don't
sure.
necessarily want to show them clause library. I mean, it's really hard to sell clause library
Ooh,
to
I didn't
get
even want to
business.
look at it. Yeah. No, I didn't want to look at it. I wanted to see what the CRM to CLM flow looked like. And if you celebrate and you remind the business teams about the wins as you're going through, that keeps the energy going. And so when you see the CRM integration to the CLM and then going through to the e-sign tool and then saving it back into the CRM team, you can do these like check-ins with the sales team as they're going through the demo. Like, hey, does that feel like what you guys are kind of already doing or already should be doing? Does that feel like a nice process for your clients? And I mean this like to be authentic about it, to actually learn. And so, one thing I learned was as we were demoing different tools, some of them, as the documents get generated, they kind of have alphanumeric names into the titles of the documents. And some of the sales team said like, hey, that's going to look really funny to our clients. Some of them are regulated entities. It won't get past their spam filters. Like these are things lawyers wouldn't think about. And so if you go in with
I mean,
like
you will
an
never find a
openness,
lawyer who cares, who would
no.
who would be bothered by alphanumeric name, because that's what we create. That's how all my files, and even what's wrong with alphanumeric name for my file? That's what I do all day.
Yeah, and they think about this stuff because they're in the operational side, right? Like, and so you start to imagine yourself as them. Does it feel easy? Does it feel like no more of a lift? And does it feel like my clients will have no problem signing this? Because if they're saying, yes, this is actually a better flow for my prospects and clients than I have today, well, now you've got their energy. Now you've got their money because they're throwing money at those problems anyways, right? Like businesses throw money at signing clients. Great. Now you've offered up a better solution to achieve their goal. And so that was like, and we replicated this with all the different teams. We did the same thing from the integration of the CLM into the billing tool with the finance team. We didn't bring them along for the full journey about like, oh, okay, well, you can negotiate this clause this way and drop in this state's laws instead of this one. No, we just said like, okay, contract signed, went back into the CRM tool. Now we need to show you the integration to our finance billing tool. Is that data going to track across accurately? What work needs to be done? How does that work when you send it out? That's what they care about. And if you can tell them that they can take their payables down from 180 days to 90 days or whatever their goal is for the year on their team, well, now you've helped them achieve their goal extremely efficiently. So how do you think they're going to feel about you?
I can listen to you all day, so this is great. There's a question from the audience. I'll put it up and let you read about the in-product messaging, direct calls, and all of this to get attention of actually a legal team, say an enlightened general counsel like yourself, who then can sell it internally to solve the specific problem that they're already throwing money into and making sure that it's not jarring of an experience for them or prospective clients. So do you have any thoughts about, those solutions, legal folks, how to approach them, and whether in product messaging or ads or what, or direct calls, what makes sense?
And so is this question, and sorry, James, is this question kind of like from the legal tech vendor side to sell to
I think
lawyers?
so. We
Okay.
won't be able to hear from James. That's why I've kind of
Okay.
put it up. But I do
Yeah.
think
Okay.
that James is asking you as a seasoned general counsel,
Yeah.
what is the best way to approach you so that
Yeah.
you can do the heavy lifting of selling it internally? How do,
Yeah. I
basically,
think there's two
James
pieces
wants to
that,
put you to work.
yeah,
How can he put somebody like you
as
to work?
as you should. Like this is the right approach. Is you want to try to do like almost a train the trainer here. So I think there's two things. The first is if you're the vendor, so say you're a salesperson or account management person, and you're trying to get the attention of legal prospects, it actually goes back to what Olga said at the very beginning, which is if you talk at people and you tell them like, hey, you never even thought about the solution, good thing I'm here to enlighten you, then that feels a little bit defensive and exhausting, especially to lawyers, right? Lawyers learn through community building. And so if you're on the vendor side and you're trying to sell a solution to a lawyer, it's kind of like sharing the story and the journey and asking for their perspective. I think that's when you'll notice, like on LinkedIn, if you ask lawyers for their perspective around legal things, you're going to get a lot of comments. And so if I'm selling to lawyers, I'm trying to learn from them and gain their perspective. That's how I get their attention. And then if I was through that gate and I wanted to get the general counsel prospect to help sell a solution internally, I would want to know from that general prospect, almost I would want to like train them too in a very gentle way to be like, okay, so what are your key stakeholders going to care about? I would want to teach them all this stuff we're talking about today. What does your sales team care about? What does your finance team care about? And I'd want to help them build a talk track that they could use with their sales team if that's not intuitive to them. Because otherwise, they're going to go into that conversation with the sales team talking about the law and they will get nothing back. And your sales cycle will die right there. So I build community to help them learn and get their feedback. And then I would help them build talk tracks so that they can sell it internally for you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Being a in-house lawyer is a lonely job. I don't care how big your department is. I've been at a big department and smaller departments. If it's a small department, you're definitely unique and misunderstood. And if you're part of the big department, you rarely work with other lawyers. You actually sort of divide and conquer and run into different
Yeah.
directions. It's a little bit like actually it's comparable to being a lonely DA full of room of other people where everyone is kind of rooting for the other guy. It's that type of experience because we never overstaffed. So this experience of talking and asking for their point of view, I think is actually makes sense because you frankly may be the only ears they get who wants to talk about their problems. So I think that that's really spot on. We have a few more groupies in the audience. Jeff is saying hello and
Hey,
cheering for
Jeff.
you, and then John is as well. So you got some real groupies in the audience. We
Wow,
are
those two
coming.
are amazing.
They are amazing. I love John's video, though, and I can't wait to have a conversation with Jeff tomorrow. I mean, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, that's great.
So we are coming to the end. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I do have a few more questions. I want to focus a little bit on implementation process because that's so
Mm,
easy. Let's talk about it. How do you keep the energy up, folks focused? How do you incentivize them
yeah.
to keep on learning? Because frankly, implementation, especially for CLMs, I mean, this is where they go to die.
Yes. Yes. You get kind of caught in the weeds on it and you're trying to perfect it for everyone without gathering enough intel. And then you leave the lag times too long. And then you come back to them with something kind of saying that you think it's there. And then they're going to point out all of these things that are wrong with it. And then you just feel like you're going in loops. And so I would try to advise something that's a little bit more real time. And so I would tell folks that this is the version 1 launch. And the version 1 launch, we pre agreed on the core win or two. And we already acknowledge that there are going to be 5 or 6, secondary, tertiary edge case scenarios that this process is not meant to solve. And that is also okay. Because if you remember, 3 months ago, we had no automation. And so we were doing everything manually. So if we can take 70%, the main cases that we use, and take those into automation, well, think about all the capacity we have for the 30%, the secondary, the tertiary cases. And that talk track reduces the kind of poking that you get when you show up with this is fully baked, this is going to solve all your problems, because you're going to get people who are a little bit reticent or suspicious, and they feel like you haven't gathered enough of their feedback, and they're going to want to show you. And so instead, if you tell them, this is the version 1, we've pre-agreed, this is the win or two, and it's going to solve 70% of our pain. Isn't that a beautiful thing? And we know, and we are going to get your feedback on all of the other things that we haven't accomplished yet, which we will get in versions 2 and 3. And I can't wait to show you those. So what that does is you gather feedback, you pre-agree on wins, you focus it, and then you make the turns faster. And so as you're building that version 1 flow, you get the key stakeholders and you show them, hey, this is the direction we're going. This is what it feels like right now. And you give people a chance before you get too far down the lane for them to blow it up. And so that kind of quicker iteration and focus on the massive win and being very clear that there will be time for versions 2 and 3 because you're getting tons of capacity back. That was a massive win to keep people engaged and focused on the implementation journey.
I want to dig a little bit into this pre-agreeing on
Mm,
wins.
mm,
Because it's very important, clearly, and I love these sort of version 1 or stage 1. The process of pre-agreeing is actually more difficult than it sounds, and
mhm,
I'm really curious, kind of, who do you approach? How do you have this conversation? How do you sort of get them to agree how many stages we have? What is the definition of each stage? Winning each stage, and then kind of I think the third thing you mentioned is sort of feedback throughout to
mhm.
infuse in your current or the following stages.
Yeah. I think my best advice here is like, don't worry that this isn't going to go perfectly because it's not. You're going to think that you have perfect pre-agreement and you're going to think you're going to show them quickly enough, and you're not. Everyone's always going to have a problem with it. And I think if you show up kind of prepared for that a little bit, then you're going to be in a better place first of all. But here's what I did. I said to the sales team, okay, your biggest win is getting the 70% pain out of generating contracts for the main product for our typical client type and getting that automated so it can sign faster because they don't typically negotiate, and we could close deals faster if it felt like a simpler process. We will build for them. Yes, we've got enterprise clients that are trickier and they want to negotiate more. And yes, we've got regulated clients. They're always going to want to negotiate. But for this 70%, let's just focus on them, because if I can make that a one-click sign for you, is that a win? That's a beautiful win for them, because remember, they were doing that manually before too. And with the account management team and the finance team, it was the same thing. It's like, find the key thing that they care about that is also the easiest lift. And so for the account management team, it was like, okay, for our simplest clients that are 50% of our client base in terms of their data types. When we clean up our CRM tool as we're going through this integration process, what are the most important fields that you got to make sure are right? I'm never trying to boil the ocean with folks. You know why? Because things change as you go. And so I think if you go in always trying to put like rough percentages around what the win will feel like, and you in your mind know, yeah, that's like a 4 out of 10 lift for an 8 out of 10 win. To me, that always felt like a beautiful thing. I didn't try to boil the ocean too early.
Yeah, I think you have some agreement there. I mean, John definitely agrees with front loading the expectation. I think that's key. I think it's, and I think you're alluding to this, Chad. Somehow we think that technology will solve like everything. On the scale from 0 to 10, like 15. We actually somehow have really high expectations for technology, much higher than we have for humans or processes. And I love your perspective of saying, look, I mean, if it's not going to be a 10, but it's going to be an 8, it's still a win.
It's a
And
massive win.
it's a massive win. I mean, I think the way I have this conversation is that in the context, you invite consultants and you pay them a lot of money in the context of Fortune 500 companies, and they really deliver, in the end of the day, 5 to 10% efficiency. And you think that's a massive win.
Right.
And you just paid a lot of money. And 5 to 10% in the context of a big company is a massive win. So, and I think that kind of putting in perspective that 8 out of 10 or even 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, especially if you think of it in stages because you can lower it. I think having that conversation of managing expectations, you it doesn't have to be 120%.
Yeah.
That's a
And
really high expectation for
you
anyone
won't
or
hit it.
anything.
You won't hit it. And I think too, like you can remove fear. So the other thing that happens to a lot of legal teams is business teams feel like, whoa, you're trying to automate everything. Well, I've got very specific client types and I've got very specific client needs. Remember where this is coming from. It's not because they hate legal, it's because they put bread on their family's table by closing deals. And if they feel like you're going to make it harder for them to close deals, that means their family doesn't eat. Well, they don't like that. And so you can't try to over engineer everything. You have to give them the peace of mind of knowing I've got your back. And so I would actually tell them that. I would say, listen, for the simplest structured deals so that you can close those faster, we're going after those in version 1. For all the stuff that has more hair on it that we know is trickier from the client type or the product type, I've got you. And guess what? We've got more capacity to have your back too when we have to get into a manual world. So you're actually getting more on both fronts. I'm not trying to take anything away from you. And if you can reduce the human stress, you're going to get a champion. You're not going to get a naysayer.
You and I can talk about this all day. Clearly, I love your company and your insights, and thank you so much for sharing. Our time has come to the end, unfortunately, and it's time for us to say goodbye. But before we do that, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed. And two, what is one takeaway you want to leave folks with? I Especially, I think the one thing we didn't get to into too much is implementations and next stages. That's a good opportunity to add additional insights or maybe sum things up for people so they can, do legal ops better next
Yeah.
time.
I would say, like, if you're going to remember anything, I would try to tell myself, and I put a sticky on my screen, which is my first reaction to all conversations with business teams: celebration, curiosity. Because remember this, that negotiation that you're doing that you feel like is a red line from the Stone Age, they might have spent 18 months beating a competitor through 18 demos to get that deal. And that deal is a big deal for their quota, and it's a big deal for their commission and to feed their family. And so if you go in celebrating them for the effort that they put in that you haven't seen, and you use your curiosity to find out what it means to them, what they're worried about, this is the data that you need. You don't need what's already in your mind. You already know all this stuff about why it helps the legal team. That's not what you got to talk to them about. Celebration, curiosity, it turns them into champions for you.
Oh, I love it. And I'm not the only one who think that this was extremely helpful and insightful. Thank you so much, Chad, for joining, for contributing to this book. So much
Yes.
fun. I'm
Well,
so
thank
glad.
you for being an editor, and to Meme and Humaira and everyone that contributed. You know, Olga, you're really pushing everyone forward, with your energy and events like this. And, a lot of folks owe a lot to the way that you celebrate folks. So it's meaningful stuff. And I know that everyone probably thinks it's very intuitive that this, but I wanted to make sure that I said that because,
Wow.
you put in a lot of effort to lift a lot of people up. And so just wanted to share that appreciation with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really a joy to be surrounded by amazing leaders who are building the future of law because what I know for a fact is that we can definitely law better. And this effort is a testament that the people to build future of law are here and they're busy at work. And so I'm really excited. Thank you so much for joining. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, everyone, for being part of this conversation. I appreciate everyone's comments. I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for stopping by. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Notes to My Legal Self, Let's Law Better. Know someone who'd make a great guest? Let us know. Self-nominations are encouraged. They're an act of courage. Just remember, the future of law is looking pretty awesome. Let's team up and shake things up in the legal world together. See you soon.